Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome to my 2010 roster build overview. So finally my 2010 build is complete. It took a lot of extra time this year, obviously, because I haven't had as much time to work on my roster builds because I'm kind of busy with stuff that I wasn't able to get as much time into it as I did last year. So this took an extra month or two, but it is probably worthwhile to wait anyways. And I'm very excited to show you guys what I built. Now, what's a little bit different about this roster build compared to my roster build last year is I did use a little bit of ChatGPT for basically some overall ratings and stuff like that. So some of the ratings and stuff you'll see in the NHL and all that don't reflect technically my full-on opinion, but I went with it anyways. And then also with this roster build, I didn't create any NHL teams jerseys basically, except for the Atlanta Thrashers and the Phoenix Coyotes. So that way you could basically replace Utah and also replace the Winnipeg Jets. So there is only a couple NHL created teams in terms of jerseys. The main reason I did that is because every single NHL team from the 2010 season has a lot of their jerseys already in the game. So I was just like, to save time, might as well just let you guys use those actual teams. That way you can use those in franchise mode and also get the unsigned prospects still like normal. So there's only basically for when you do the setup portion, which there will be a setup portion of this video, you basically only need to sub in the AHL created teams and rework obviously the divisions and that stuff, like I said. So this is a little bit of a different roster than normal, but you can see here, basically, as I skim through this, you can see we have all these AHL teams, and then there's obviously like the Atlanta Thrashers, so you'll have custom jerseys for them. They won't have any unsigned prospects in franchise mode, just because for some reason when you still sub in created teams, for regular teams, they don't get any unsigned prospects. So Atlanta doesn't have any unsigned prospects, but if you use just the Winnipeg Jets and don't want to replace them with the Thrashers, you would get two unsigned prospects, which are Ben Sherratt and Eddie Pasquale. So just a heads up, if you want those two guys, just leave it as the Jets. But if you don't care about Ben Sherratt and Eddie Pasquale, which I don't, to be honest, just replace them with the Thrashers and they'll be okay. Aside from that, like I said, more AHL teams, Binghamton, stuff like that. This year, obviously, since it's a 2010 build, I had to do some Olympic teams, so I only did Canada and United States. Maybe eventually down the road I could do a version 2 where maybe I add like the Finnish team and stuff like that. But there is room for you guys to make your own Finnish team or Swedish team, whatever you want as well. But we do have the Canada Olympic men's, which has everybody on that team. Also, the lines are set up, so basically it will start the exact lines that were in that crucial game where Canada won the gold medal. So just a heads up, if you want to watch the AI play against each other, you could definitely do that with these rosters, of course. Chicago Wolves, you have Grand Rapids, stuff like that. So I'm just going to skim through this. But yeah, a lot of fun different jerseys as well that I made for all these, obviously, AHL teams. Sucks that I didn't have to do this for the NHL, but like I said, it would have taken a lot more time to do NHL teams. And then you also have, like I said, the Phoenix Coyotes. Obviously, since their jerseys and everything is no longer in the game because of the Utah Hockey Club, I had to make my own Coyotes jerseys, so I hope that you guys actually like them. They look pretty similar to the actual ones from this time period, but we had to use the Cool Dogs logo, which kind of sucks because of the fact that there is no Kachina logo, no old Coyotes logos in the games anymore. Like, I don't know why they had to remove them. It kind of sucks, but I think it was the same thing obviously when the Thrashers moved, of course, and Winnipeg took over. So there's that. There is also some AHL All-Star teams as well, because the AHL All-Star game did take place that year. So you do have the Portland Canada All-Stars, and then you also have Portland Planet USA. So that All-Star game was in Portland, Maine that year, which you would obviously know about. So you could literally watch an AHL All-Star game if you want to, which is kind of cool. There's a lot of good players on both teams that played in the AHL, and were kind of like AHL ringers, so to speak. And then, yeah, there's some more AHL teams, of course, with some pretty good jerseys, I'd say. Some of them are a little bit weird looking, but others are pretty damn good. There's the USA Olympic men's team as well. They came out worst in Canada, which makes sense at the time, but both teams are pretty damn stacked, as I might show you guys in this video. So there is basically all that. I think next I will show you guys basically what it looks like in franchise mode, so you guys can see like some of the players on each team. There will also be like a segment, like I'll probably put it into little sections where you guys can see how to set this up for franchise mode. So if you don't care about the rosters in any state, obviously just jump on into like the setup, so that way you guys know how to set this up for a custom league so it works the right way. Okay guys, so here is the roster portion of the video. So I know a lot of you guys are very excited for this, so let's get into basically what the rosters look like in franchise mode, and it's pretty damn exciting. There's unsigned prospects for teams. There's free agents you could sign to start franchise mode. There's obviously draft picks in the first 4 years of franchise mode. And then every single team has NHLers and AHLers as well, which makes it even more exciting. So let's go through each team. There's also trade clauses involved for every single team too, so you do have some people with some weird contracts, but it is a very exciting roster build. So if I remove my face, you guys can actually see a little bit more here. You can see that some players have clauses, like Timo Solani, for instance. He has a trade clause. You have guys like Scott Niedermayer on a no movement clause, Vishnowsky on a no trade clause, a modified no trade for Koivu, that type of thing. But I'm not too sure of 100% if all these clauses I gave are 100% accurate or not. Some of them are from like random Google searches and finding out that people had clauses during specific years. Some of them I found on other websites that actually give clause information, but it's kind of hard to find clause info without cap friendly anymore. So hopefully most of this is pretty accurate with a sense, but like I said, these ratings aren't my personal opinion. It's ChatGPT, most of them. So just in case you guys see anybody that's super highly rated that shouldn't be, like maybe Steve Eminger shouldn't be an 80 overall. Maybe he should be like a 78. This is not my personal opinion. But let me show you guys the attributes, because the attributes that GPT spat out for some of these guys is pretty damn interesting. So if we go to somebody like Ryan Getzlaff, for instance, and look at his attributes here, you can see that it made him a pretty good body checker, like decently physical, good defensively, good face-offs, good offensive stats, very good passing, that type of thing. There are some people that are a little bit more accurate than others, which I'll get to when we get to Chicago, because that's the one that is probably one of the most accurate in Patrick Kane. Yeah, anyways, there's that. The goaltenders involved in the NHL as well for the Ducks. If we go to the AHL, you can see they have some guys down there that they sent down, like Bonino, Ryan Carter, stuff like that. Obviously, the AI is going to make some adjustments accordingly and send people down that shouldn't necessarily be getting sent down, but I thought I'll show you guys a little bit of the AHL at least. We don't need to necessarily look through every single team's AHL team, but still we'll show you guys a little bit of it at least. I'll go to Atlanta. Their best player literally at this stage is Toby Enstrom, because obviously the Ilya Kovalchuk trade happened by this point in time. So yeah, Toby Enstrom being the best player is not what I thought was going to happen with the Thrashers, but Toby Enstrom's a good player. He's another one of these kind of examples that ChatGPT, I think, did a pretty good job with the ratings, because as you can see here, in terms of how he is rated, he actually has really low physical attributes, which I'm pretty sure he was quite weak in terms of physical, like he didn't throw a lot of hits, that type of thing, but he's got really good passing stats, good offensive awareness. I'm pretty sure, what was the other stat? Oh yeah, good shot blocking, good stick checking. Like, he's a pretty damn solid defensive player too, but yeah, that's what GPT gave me. Some of the like bigger guys are going to be a bit slower, because that's how also ChatGPT was coming up with ratings and stuff. But yeah, this is a very exciting build. Like, I don't even know really how this is going to simulate in franchise mode too much, because like I've only simulated a couple seasons in this. I've never simulated all the way till like year 4's draft class, so I don't know if I made Nathan MacKinnon too good, because he might honestly come out of the draft class as like an 86 franchise player or something like that. But honestly, don't know what overall he'll be at that stage. One thing that's kind of annoying is though some players are still getting dropped even though there's contract room and money room. So Chris Chelios should be on this Atlanta Thrashers AHL team, but for some reason he gets dropped even though there is a contract space and cap room. I'm not too sure if the game has like a hard cap of 45 skaters and 5 goaltenders for the 50 contracts or what, but for some reason they just drop him to free agency. So kind of sucks, but I don't think there's any things I could do to actually fix that. Then we had to get teams like Boston, Zdeno Chara being their best player. He's on a full no movement clause for these 2 years, and then obviously you'll have to re-sign him, but I think he's a fairly good defenseman. I think he's probably one of the best defensemen in this roster build, if I remember right. So he should simulate decently. Not too sure on his offensive prowess, but you could see that like GPT gave him a 99 slap shot power, so GPT knows a lot of interesting things. It only gave him an 84 offensive awareness, which I think is a bit low, but I think he still should simulate pretty decently. You have people like Patrice Bergeron, for instance, though, like where it gave him 90 face-offs and stuff. So you can see where I was definitely liking what GPT was giving me. It'll be interesting to see what some of these guys end up doing in franchise modes. So we'll just skim through a couple of these teams. I think maybe I'll go through every team. I was thinking about maybe only doing a few teams, but Maybe I'll go through the main roster on most teams. Actually, I should show you guys that some teams have unsigned prospects though too, because that's one thing I forgot to do. If we go back to like the Ducks, for instance, here and go to unsigned, you can see that they have guys like Jake Gardner, Brandon McMillan, Kyle Palmieri. So you'll have some prospects on regardless of what team you do. Anaheim literally has 3 defensive prospects, and they're all pretty good. So you definitely have some options to build up your defensive core in the future if you choose the Ducks, I guess. But yeah, every team has unsigned players, AHLers, and NHLers. And like I said, I tried to give accurate clauses to everybody. I'm not too sure if some of them are accurate or not. Craig Rivet, for instance, I don't know for sure if he had no trade clause, but I'm pretty sure I saw that he did have one on one of those contract-based websites. I can't remember what it was called. But hopefully most of this is accurate. And it'll be interesting to see how players stay, if the players stay with their teams or if they get dealt or whatever. And also see how you guys play with franchise mode too, because are you going to try and get somebody to waive their no trade clause, for instance, like Jay Bomeister in Calgary, you know? Are you going to try and get Alex Kotolik to waive his no trade clause, because apparently he had a clause in those days. That's what I found out from Google, but we'll see if that's actually accurate or not. Some of you Flames fans might remember if these guys like Corey Sarge had no movement clause. I don't remember for sure, though, if that's accurate or not. So there is all of that. Carolina, their best player being Eric Stahl. I probably won't skim through the rest of this. I'll skim through every team, but I'll just show you guys their top players just because this will take way too long. But like I said, every team has some decent players in the AHL as well. Brian Rodney, for instance, in Carolina. So you definitely could reach into the AHL quite a bit. Now, the Chicago Blackhawks, who won the Cup in 2010, obviously they're pretty damn stacked. So much so that they sent Nick Hjalmarsson to the AHL, so that's a little bit of a weird one. But they do have a very strong defensive core in Chicago. I don't know why they didn't keep him up and didn't send like somebody like Jordan Hendry down, but that's the way the AI is, I guess, simulating right now. So is what it is. But yeah, a lot of solid players in this. And it took so many hours to do this roster build that I'm so glad I'm finally done with it, just because it was like a lot of my free time. Just basically whenever I'd actually have free time outside of the gym and all that, I'd be basically working on this. So yeah, some fun players in the build. And hopefully it, like I said, hopefully it simulates decently. Doesn't have to simulate the most accurate, but I just want you guys to have fun with it. And that's the most important thing about it. Obviously, the Detroit Red Wings coming off back-to-back Cup finals. They are still pretty damn stacked at this point as well. Edmonton is pretty shit, so if you want to rebuild her, they have some okay pieces like Penner, Hemsky, Soure, and all that, and some young guys like Gagne, for instance, and also an unsigned Jordan Eberle, but they're still a team that needs probably some work, I would assume. Florida's another team that shouldn't be too good, led by Brian McCabe of all people. So yeah, Florida could use some work. But they do have some decent unsigned prospects, I think. Shore's not the greatest, but Jacob Markstrom as an unsigned goalie prospect is a pretty good one. I just hope that the AI teams don't let some of these guys go after 1 year, because it'd be kind of annoying, just because some of them are drafted in 08. Anze Kopitar leading the LA Kings. So this is the LA Kings before they actually started to make a push for that Stanley Cup win, obviously in 2012. It's kind of crazy that this team went on to win the Cup in 2012, because at this stage, they don't have the best NHL team. They have like Kopitar, obviously, and stuff like that, and a young Drew Doughty. But they still do need a lot more work. And a young, I guess, Jonathan Quick. So they have some young pieces, but they still have work to do. They do have guys in the minors that are pretty good, like Alec Martinez, for instance, Trevor Lewis. Like, they have guys that were part of those Cup-winning teams. Voinov as well. So some of those guys might help them develop into being a Cup contender early on. Minnesota, led by Marty Havlat. Pretty solid. We head to Montreal, led by Andrei Markov. So Markov's one of these guys that GPT rated an 89 overall. Now, I think that's pretty decent, because I do think Markov is one of the more underrated defenders of the 2010s. But an 89 is a little high for me, but that's okay, because GPT, I feel like, has come up with some pretty good results for most players, so I was okay with it. He's also an offensive defenseman, I think. Yeah, he's an OFD, so there's a chance you might see Andrei Markov winning some Norris trophies potentially in franchise mode. And just because some of you Habs fans wouldn't let me down if I made him a high elite, Carey Price is a franchise goaltender, 85 at 22. And I also still have Yaroslav Halak as a guy that's going to be a pending RFA at the end of the year, so I'm kind of interested to see what the Habs do with him. Because when I was doing some test runs, which was only one test run, he was an RFA for a while. And then the Montreal Canadiens were able to sign him with the cap that they had left to start the season. And he became the backup to Carey Price, I think. But I think eventually, like, if realistically, they actually might trade him like they did in real life to the St. Louis Blues. So that'd be interesting if that was the case. Nashville led by Shea Weber, Ryan Suter. Obviously more of a defensive team. New Jersey led by Ilya Kovalchuk. Which is kind of funny to see that. Zach Parise is up there. The thing that sucks about them adding no trade clauses and stuff to franchise mode and all that is the fact that you can't do like 15-year deals anymore. Because I would have given guys like Kovalchuk and DiPietro 15-year deals, but I could only max it out at like 8-year deals. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, that's basically what we'll have to deal with. Mark Streit leading the Islanders. This is another team that's quite a bit into rebuild because young John Tavares is the second best player on the team. So the Islanders definitely have some work to do. And obviously with their goaltending situation, it's kind of a bit weird because they have Rolson and Biron. And Rick DiPietro, despite being paid for 8 years, is in the minors. He doesn't have a clause, but I don't think you're moving that contract. Technically, this contract was longer than 8 years left remaining, but I had to give it 8 years because I can't make a 15-year deal. So 8 years at 4.5 for Rick DiPietro. It's definitely a boat anchor for these Islanders, and I don't know if that's going to make them end up losing people down the road, but it's kind of an interesting contract to deal with. The New York Rangers led by Marian Gaborik, Chris Drury, stuff like that. I'm kind of surprised at this Rangers team. I think they missed the playoffs if I remember right, but they have like Olli Jokinen on it, so it's a bit of an interesting team. Definitely one that could maybe over-simulate a little bit, but it is what it is. And then we head to the Ottawa Senators, led by Daniel Alfredsson, Alex Kovalev, and Jason Spezza, because they have already moved on from Heatley at this point, as you can see with Milan Michalek doing there. And also going down to here, Jonathan Cheechoo as an 80 overall. It's kind of nice, though, that Cheechoo's listed as a depth forward, though, so it's like pretty accurate, I would say. Like, he's got a good shot still, but he's not the same player as he once was, for sure. So he could probably score goals for you, but he's going to be like a depth scoring option that you might want to have on your first line next to some really good people or something like that. So, yeah, it's kind of cool. Goaltenders, Pascal Leclerc, Brian Elliott. Pascal Leclerc's durability, I think, was lowered as well. Yeah, 60 overall. So he could potentially get injured quite a bit like he did in real life. Philadelphia, you have like some really good players here. Obviously, they went to the Cup Finals as well. Claude Giroux is going to be a pending RFA in a couple seasons, which will be interesting to see what they do with that because Mike Richards does have a clause that comes into effect quite early into franchise mode. So you definitely want to try and offload some people fast if you want to re-sign Claude Giroux, I think, because I'm pretty sure I saw Claude Giroux get qualified by the Coyotes of all teams, and then they gave up 4 picks to get him in terms of compensation. So Philadelphia was not able to re-sign Claude Giroux, and the Yotes stole him, basically. So some interesting results with that, but a lot of cap on some of these big teams. We head to Phoenix. They aren't going to have any unsigned prospects, but led by Shane Doan. Not necessarily the best team at this point. They did actually have a pretty good year, but they are still not the strongest team on paper. They also do have Ilya Brzgalov, who was actually really good this season, so he's pretty damn good. But aside from that, like, I remember they brought in Lee Stempniak in, and he was really good for them, but didn't do shit for them in the playoffs. So Lee Stempniak's kind of an interesting addition that they brought in, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting Yotes team. A lot of younger options, too, so it's kind of a fun team probably to build if you want to use a fun team. The Pittsburgh Penguins obviously are a good team. They went to back-to-back Cup Finals, won the Stanley Cup the year before this, led by Crosby and Malkin, of course, 94-92. Gonchar still there, but a pending UFA. So there's a good chance that Sergei Gonchar heads to the free agent market after 1 year, just so that way you actually have cap space. Bill Guerin's also pending UFA, but that's because he retired, I'm pretty sure. But, yeah, a lot of interesting players, indeed. Crosby, I don't think... yeah, he has the last year of his contract as a no-movement clause because he's ineligible still for a little bit. So you won't see people like him with a no-movement. Malkin has a no-movement for all 5 years of his contract. Of course, Gonchar has a no-trade for this only year. So Fleury also has a no-movement. I don't remember how long it is for. Oh, it's for a while. It's modified as well. So... yeah, just watch out for those clauses because some of them might be tough to move. San Jose is a great team, but obviously no playoff success at this point. So this might be a team you want to take over. Try and get Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, Danny Heatley some Stanley Cups. But yeah, pretty good team. Joe Pavelski, Rob Blake being there. Like, yeah, this team should have probably won a Stanley Cup back in these days, but they didn't. Kind of surprised on that, to be honest. And Bakov there as well. We head to St. Louis, led by like guys like Paul Kariya, David Backes. Yeah, Eric Johnson, former first overall pick. Obviously, he's going to be a pretty solid overall because of that. But, yeah, a lot of no trade clauses there as well. We head to Tampa. Kind of a weird team at this point. Not great depth. Not great defensive core. But they still have Marty St. Louis, Vinny Lecavalier, both with no trade clauses. St. Louis only signed for 2 years, though, before he heads to free agency or retires. And Lecavalier has a boat anchor of a contract. This contract was actually like a 12-year contract, I think. But I could only give him 8 years, obviously. So, yeah, Lecavalier being an 8-year no-trade clause player and you having a young Steven Stamkos is kind of tough. Like, you might honestly have to part ways with Martin St. Louis and use Stamkos as a right winger on that top line because I don't know if Lecavalier would waive his no-trade clause, but maybe he would because the state of his team is not the best. Like I said, defensively, I mean, Andre Mazzaros is there and such like that. Young Victor Hedman's there, but it still has a long way to go before it actually starts winning Stanley Cups. And then their goaltending, too, kind of up in the air. From Toronto's perspective, this is the worst team probably I've ever seen in a franchise mode. And you could already see probably why. If we go to the forward core alone, led by Phil Kessel, and the next best is Tyler Bozak. An 88 down to an 80. So this Leafs team, if for some reason I was actually able to have draft picks be on the right teams, because for some reason it's locked to what is it, Classic. It would be nice if I could have it on set to custom, so that way Toronto would not have their 2 first-round picks for the next 2 years, because this team is very bad. Like, they have some okay players, but it's not going to be a team that wins a Stanley Cup in year 1. Like, Phil Kessel is really good. Everybody else, not so much. Not so much. They don't even also have any good guys really in the AHL either, though, too. Like, you have some older guys like Kyle Calder, Mike Zigomanis. Like, I don't know where you go from here. Like, unsigned, you have Nazem Kadri at least, so there's somebody. But in general, this is probably one of the worst teams I've seen. And then goaltending is Jaguar and Gustafsson. Like, Jaguar is going to be starting to drop off probably soon. So, it's pretty damn bad for the Leafs. Vancouver, obviously a pretty damn good team, went to the Stanley Cup Finals the year after this. Yeah, the Sedin's leading the way. I don't know. Oh, yeah, I guess GPT did make Henrik Sedin a little bit better, but they're on identical contracts, which is as expected. Ryan Kessler's there as well. It's kind of sad with this roster build, though, because this is the year, or 2 years or so. Actually, it's like a full-on year, I guess, before the deaths of like Pavel Demitra and stuff like that. So making these guys, it kind of hurt making them, but hopefully they get to play a little bit longer in the NHL and that got on that plane because goddamn, man, like I said, some of these guys played their last years in the NHL this year. Some of them were overseas already at this point, I believe, but yeah, that plane crash and then the 2011 offseason in general was one of the toughest. Like Rick Rippon's there still too in this roster build, so hopefully those guys get a little bit of shutouts just because they're playing in this roster build still. And then in terms of the Washington Capitals, Alex Ovechkin leading away. Obviously, Ovechkin's pretty damn cracked in this. GPT decided to make his shooting category absolutely insane, as he expects. So, yeah, there is what Alex Ovechkin looks like according to GPT, and it's pretty damn crazy. The one player I wanted to show you guys, though, that GPT did a very good job at, I think, though, was Patrick Kane. I did show this on Twitter like months ago. But yeah, Patrick Kane is an interesting one because he's got no physical whatsoever, which Kane obviously does not throw hits. His defensive stats are also abysmal, so it should make some of these guys simulate a little bit more realistically or play realistically. So very excited to see what ends up happening with all that. So that is that. Final things I want to take a look at and show you guys in this roster portion of the video is the free agents and the draft class stuff. So as you can see, to start off franchise mode, there is some pretty interesting free agents you could sign, including Jaromir Jagr, Sergei Fedorov, Sergei Zubov, Peter Forsberg, Marcus Naslund, Victor Kozlov, Richard Zednik, Michael Nylander, stuff like that. So you do have options to sign some pretty interesting players. All these guys were overseas at this point, but since they're legend players, I have to put them in free agency so you guys have a chance to make sure that they stay in the NHL for longer. But all of them are pretty damn old, especially the top 5 guys who are all like 36 and older. So if you sign them, they might drop off throughout the season or the next season, but they still should produce hypothetically at a pretty good rate. So yeah, there's some interesting players there. Like I was mentioning with Chris Chelios, for some reason he gets dropped, but he's 47 years old and still a depth defenseman. So if you want to bring him back to Detroit, you can. And then in terms of goaltenders, there's not really too much with goalies, the best being Michael Telquist. But if you need a backup or need an AHL goaltender, you could sign like Antti Ranta or Scott Darling as a goaltender prospect for your team. So not a lot in terms of prospects that sign right out of the gate, but there is some really good players that are old and still have a chance to maybe win a Stanley Cup with your roster. So there's the free agents. And final thing I wanted to show you guys was the draft class. Now, this doesn't reflect my personal opinion on the 2010 draft class. I don't think it's a great draft class, but Taylor Hall is the first overall selection based on this at least build. I mean, if you load up in a high prospect potentials and stuff like that, maybe there's a chance they generate a franchise guy before him, but you have Taylor Hall, Tyler Seguin up there, Vladimir Tarasenko, Mark Stone. This is technically Panarin's draft class, even though he was undrafted. I did add him to the draft class so you guys could draft Artemi Panarin. There's also people like Jeff Skinner, Cam Fowler. So you can see there's pretty good players early on that you might recognize, Ryan Johansson, Jaden Schwartz, that type of thing. But there's also some players late in the draft that are kind of interesting here if we skim through all these generated and players I made. Like, I made some pretty random people. Like, for instance, there is... wait. Didn't I have Kyle Palmieri on the Ducks, I thought? I'm confused. Okay, I might have to make a change. I gotta note that. That Kyle Palmieri's there, because I don't think he should be there. Or was he part of this draft class? I thought I put him as an unsigned player for the Ducks. I thought I did. Or did I make him 2 times accidentally in franchise mode? If I did, I have to make that adjustment before I put this out. So let me just pin that for a second here, just so I can remember. But there's some random players you could draft anyways, like Greg McKegg. If you want to draft Greg McKegg of all people, go ahead. There's also some other people down here, like Chris Wagner, for instance. So you will get some really players that are more bottom 6 oriented. Austin Watson, Sam Carrick. So you can fill out your roster a little bit more. So, and then like in terms of goalies, some draft classes are pretty strong. Like there's a draft class with Hellebuck and Vasilevsky, but this draft class has like Grubauer, Mrazek, Jack Campbell. So it's not the strongest goaltending, but there is goaltender options as well. That's interesting about the Palmieri situation, though. I got to take a look at that because I thought I literally just saw him on the Ducks unsigned. And then I also just saw him in the draft class, so I'm kind of confused. Did I make him 2 times accidentally? I did, I think. Yeah, I guess I did make him 2 times. That's weird. I got to take note of that. I definitely got to take note of that. I don't even know how I made him 2 times. Well, that means I could, unless that's a generated Kyle Palmieri. That might be actually a generated Kyle Palmieri in the same year that I made a Kyle Palmieri. Because I don't think that's, I don't think I would have made him 2 times. I don't think I'm that dumb, especially to make him like that. Yeah, I think that's a generated Kyle Palmieri. There's just no way that, let me just see what he looks like again. What position did he play? He's a right winger as well. 6'1", 183. Okay. 6'1", 183. Let me take a look at the one that I made for the Ducks, because I honestly am pretty sure I never made him 2 times. Oh man, I'm skeptical, but see, this is why you load up franchise mode and test first and all that stuff. Unsigned, let's see. Right wing, 5'11", 195. Yeah, I don't think the other one is... Yeah, the other one wouldn't... like, I wouldn't have made him taller than he actually was, so I don't think the other one's real. Just kind of funny. But the real Kyle Palmieri was drafted in like 2009, I think, or 2008. Yeah, 2009, I guess, based on this. But he didn't actually play in the OHL. He basically played in the United States. So that's why it completely threw me through a loop. But that's kind of funny. That is kind of funny. So that, I think, is going to do it for the roster portion of this video. So if you want to know how to set up this for franchise mode so it is accurate and all that stuff with the right divisions and all that, check out the next part of this video and you guys can set it up accurately so it simulates properly, realistically. Okay guys, so this is what you need to have set up for custom leagues so it works the right ways. So you want to have 30 teams, 2 conferences, and 6 divisions in the NHL. You also want a salary cap max of $57 million, a salary cap minimum of $41 million, and then player salary max is 11.4 only, player salary minimum of $515K, and a rookie salary max of $915K. First schedules, you want 82 games as per usual, as you'd expect, 24 divisional games, 40 conference games, and only 18 interconference games. And in the standings formats, obviously 5 minutes of 4-on-4 in the shootout. The points obviously stay the same as current day. For playoff qualification, it's the conference, and you also want playoff reseeding, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not too sure on that. I think it was a thing still at those times, so just set that up like that. And then you want 8 teams per conference that make it into the playoffs. Aside from that, the AHL is basically set up a little bit differently. There is 2 conferences, 4 divisions. They also have only 80 games in the AHL at this point in time, 36 division games, 32 conference games, and 12 interconference. I'm not too sure if that's fully accurate, but that's what ChatGPT was telling me, so that's my guess. And then we also have 5 minutes 4-on-4 and then shootout in the AHL, just like the NHL. I'm not too sure exactly on the playoff setup for the AHL at this point in time. So if you guys know exactly how this should be set up, let me know down below in the comments. That way other people could set it up occasionally too, the right way. But I honestly don't even know what the AHL was set up like for that part of things. So that's the basic setup now. Now we also have a few other things obviously we got to do here, which is also including some new teams. So we do have to substitute the Winnipeg Jets for the Atlanta Thrashers in this, of course, because the Atlanta Thrashers, we are going to use them in our little test run that I'm going to show you guys, or not test run, but just show you guys anyways. So there is the Atlanta Thrashers subbed in. And then you also want to substitute the Utah Hockey Club, obviously, for the Phoenix Coyotes, because obviously the Phoenix Coyotes were a team back in these days. They still should be a team in my opinion, but I do like that Utah has a team. So we'll go with Phoenix there as well. And now you basically have to just do division realignments and subbing in AHL teams. Okay guys, so this is the division realignment part of the episode, which I already realigned the divisions and substituted the teams, but I want to show you guys basically how you should have it set up so that way it works actually like it is in 2010s. So this is the NHL in terms of how it is set up. So obviously you got the Western Conference. This is the Pacific Division. And then we have the Central Division, which should look like this. And we also have the Northwest Division. I'm not going to name the divisions in this test run just because I feel like it adds a lot more time to this. But if you guys are actually doing a full-on franchise mode, I recommend obviously naming the divisions accordingly and the conferences. So that's the Western Conference. Then we have the Eastern Conference, which the first Eastern Conference division that we have here is the Atlantic Division. This is comprised of the New York-based teams and New Jersey, as well as Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Then you also have the Northeast Division, which is the division I'm most familiar with from back in the day of Boston, Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, and Buffalo. And then you have the Southeast Division, which is the one with the Atlanta Thrashers, Tampa, Florida, Washington, and Carolina. So you can kind of see why, though, the Southeast Division was always one of the weaker divisions in the league back in these days. It's pretty damn weak in this sense, but this is how you should have the NHL set up. Okay, and finally, how to set up the AHL. Make sure you have it set up properly with the teams being substituted in for the real teams. So for instance, like Tucson, the Roadrunners, they should be substituted with like the Rampage. A lot of teams do have similar names still, so the Milwaukee substitutes with Milwaukee, but there is some that are a little bit different from the time period. So just make sure you do it accurately so that way each team is actually getting the right AHL players, because if you do it incorrectly, it might screw things up. So if you need help with what teams should be subbed for what, let me know and I can help you out in the comments. I'm not going to go super in depth with it in this video just because it's very time consuming and I don't want you guys being sitting here for an hour. I want you guys testing out the build, so just a little heads up with that. But anyways, in terms of how the divisions are set up in the AHL, basically we have the Western Conference, which are these 2 divisions here. Then we also have the 2 divisions here, which are the Eastern Conference. So starting off with the Eastern Conference, right here we have the Atlantic Division. This is comprised mainly of teams that are from like Maine, Massachusetts, stuff like that. So just basically, if you know your geography, you know that most of these teams should be in this division. So that is basically the Atlantic Division. Then you have the East Division, which is more teams based in like Pennsylvania, New York, also Virginia. So these teams are all in that. So this is what the Eastern Conference should be made up of, is all these teams. And hopefully you guys could set that up quite easily. If you can't, like I said, I could help you in the comments. And then in terms of the Western Conference, you do have also 2 divisions. So this one right here is the West Division, which is Chicago, Texas, Rockford, stuff like that. So kind of more centralized America in a sense. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is the Anaheim Ducks didn't actually have an AHL team during this year, which is very strange. But basically, a lot of their players were moved through multiple AHL affiliates with random teams, while they basically got themselves another AHL team, which came the year afterwards. So the Iowa Chops are going to still be in this build, just so that way you could actually have an AHL affiliate, but they didn't exist in 2009-10. Just a heads up with that, but they are going to be Anaheim's affiliate. Instead of obviously doing what they did in real life, which is spreading out the AHL players through multiple random teams in the league. So this is basically, like I said, the West Division, but it looks like a Central Division almost to me in a sense. And then you also have the last division, which is the North Division. This is comprised of teams that are in Canada too, and some American ones like the Rochester Americans, but you have Hamilton, you have Abbotsford, Manitoba, and you also have Toronto in there and stuff like that as well. So make sure you're substituting in the right teams and setting up the divisions correctly. Also make sure you name the divisions if you want a more accurate experience. You don't have to do it, but that is basically how the divisions should be set up in both the NHL and AHL. So feel free to pause the video at any point and just basically copy that while you're doing it. And yeah, that's basically how it should be set up. So that's like one of the meat and potatoes parts of setting up franchise mode, and I'm glad that I'm done with that part just because it takes usually a long time. And aside for this, you don't really need to worry about any of this stuff. You guys should turn off Fog of War if you want to. I don't really care. Player morale, you could probably keep on if you want, but obviously it depends if players are going to lose morale and stuff. But like I said, it doesn't matter about what these things are. This is all up to personal preference for you guys. And then final few things we got to take a look at is the rules and setting. Now, this is also an important part of the setup and basically getting stuff kind of accurate, in my opinion. So basically, trade difficulty and stuff like that, like I said, is all up to you. However, the things that is most important here, actually, it's not on this part, but actually, I do want to mention one thing. This is kind of pissing me off. So with this roster build, you guys know how you can move draft picks and stuff around. I basically made it like exactly accurate kind of to the 2010 draft. So basically like Ottawa's pick is in St. Louis, stuff like that. Now, for some reason, this is locked to classic and I can't even change this to custom or authentic or something like that. So I'm going to have to try and get EA to make this not locked to classic, and it should be able to set to custom instead, because now you guys aren't going to get the accurate draft pick experience that I was exactly hoping for. So for instance, like Toronto doesn't have 2 first-round picks in the first 2 years of franchise mode. Well, they are going to have 2 picks because this is locked to classic. If there was a way to change this to custom, they would not have picks for the first 2 years, which would make it even more interesting. So kind of sucks, but yeah, this is locked to classic for some weird reason. So just a heads up on that. Once they eventually try and maybe find a way to make this change over to custom, that would be nice. But I really don't know if that's going to even come this year. But I'm going to have to try and force my hand in trying to get them to change that. So just a heads up with that. So that is that. So there's not really too much in terms of that part. In terms of advanced setting, this is where basically a lot of this is kind of like up to you. I didn't do a lot of sim testing with this roster build, so just a heads up again that this build, like I don't know how it's going to simulate in terms of that. So you guys can literally play around with like the scoring. You can play around with the draft class quality, the generated prospect quality. But I did make a lot of draft prospects, so you could probably for the first 4 years or so maybe drop this down to low. But obviously you could have it at medium if you wanted to, or change it up to high. But all this stuff is personal preference. The one thing though that is important here especially is retired jerseys. A lot of people always forget this part. Make sure you turn this to off. That way you're not getting people that have retired numbers like Daniel Alfredsson changing to number 12 instead of number 11. So make sure you turn that off. Make sure you do that. So aside from that, I think that is pretty much it, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of setup. Let's see, advanced settings. Let me see, was there anything else? I don't feel like there is anything else. I don't think there's anything else we could really adjust. So that's basically how you set this up for franchise mode. And as you can see, Ottawa's affiliate is the Binghamton Senators. Make sure you have the all set up, like I said, properly. And then you'll actually get a full-on authentic experience. And this is where we're going to get into basically showing you guys the rosters for all the teams and stuff like that, which obviously I'm going to be putting that part of the video basically before this part. So yeah, this is basically going to be the end of this video, but also I'm going to be still recording after this to put it before. I know it's kind of confusing, but anyways, guys, that is going to do it for this 2010 roster build. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun stuff in this roster. Like I said, there's a lot of good players in this build. There's a lot of good jerseys that I built for the AHL teams and stuff like that. There's the Olympic stuff. There's the AHL All-Star teams. It's like probably going to be one of my favorite roster builds I've made, maybe except for my 2000 build, but it's definitely up there as one of my favorite rosters. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. And yeah, obviously this video for some reason took me a lot of attempts to make, so hopefully the roster build isn't going out too late, but very excited for you guys to see it and test it out yourself. So let me know down below, and I'll see you guys next time.